He who is brave is free. We know that from Seneca. That's why I invited in the podcast only brave people to inspire us to live freely. Enjoy. Hello, everybody. Hello, Nick. And thank you so much for accepting our invitation to come to this Courage podcast. Thank you. Today we have with us or with me, because I'm alone here. So I'm together with Nick Scott, an Irish guy, as you could easily see, whom I've met 2 months ago or 1 month in a Buddhist teaching retreat in Romania. And I have been fortunate enough to have met him there, and this experience changed a lot of my interior, and not to say that changed my life, but changed a lot of me. And I just wanted to invite him for you to get the chance how he sees courage and his approach on courage from a wiser perspective of life and a Buddhist teaching perspective of life. And sorry for my rusty English, but his English is much better, so that's why I will leave Nick. I will introduce Nick, and I will invite Nick to introduce himself because he's much better at this. And thank you, Nick, again for coming here.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So yes, I'm a teacher of Buddhist meditation. I now mostly teach the long 10-day silent retreats. I do that, I'm mostly doing that because there are a few people qualified to do it. Personally, I've been practicing meditation since I was 20, coming up to my 21st birthday, and I'm now 71, so that makes 50 years. And in that time, I practiced as a layperson in ordinary life, but I did spend 10 years in a monastery, in a Buddhist monastery. I've done a few kind of unusual things. I've done a long 6-month pilgrimage with a Buddhist monk, Ajahn Suchito, who's now a famous teacher, where we walked around. That was a courageous thing to do.
Very courageous thing.
walk around India, living on alms food. He wanted to live a traditional life as a Buddhist monk, and I went along with that. So that was sleeping under mango trees and living on alms food. Very difficult thing to do. So I've done a few things. I've done long retreats, and about 25 years ago, I had an invitation to start to teach a retreat. I felt I was at the stage I could do that, and I went to the monks that I respected, the senior monks, and asked them, and they felt I was at that stage. So now for over 20 years, I've been teaching retreats, and I mostly teach in Ireland. But when I got, and in fact, I got to the point where I was only teaching in Ireland because I couldn't see the point in accepting invitations to go to France or somewhere else when they have teachers there. But when I had an invitation to teach in Romania, they didn't have anyone who could teach 10-day retreats, so I agreed. And for the last 6 years, I've been coming over to Romania and teaching retreats. The first, I said they had to be 10-day retreats. I wasn't going to teach anything shorter. And there were only 4 guys who wanted to do the first one. But they've grown now. And I think it was something like 28 on the retreat I just taught. And that's nearly full. I won't teach more than 30. So
okay. I'm very happy.
One thing I do have to correct, because someone else will point out who knows, is that I'm not Irish. I might look like an Irishman, but I'm an Englishman, right? So I came over to Ireland 20 years ago to live with my partner, an Irish woman, who I had been in a relationship with much longer than that, but we'd been living in separate countries.
Okay. Sorry.
I'm living here on the west coast of Ireland, right next to the Atlantic. So there we are. There's the intro.
You are an Englishman, yes. But you said to us, you told us that your accent is a little bit Irish, right? Or I remembered. No. Okay. So
No,
it was all in my head.
yeah. But I do look Irish. You're right. You can get away with looking like this in Ireland. It looks very normal in Ireland. Sometimes when I used to go to England in the past, you know, for some business meeting or something, I'd tidy myself up and make my beard shorter and stuff. Because in England, the way I look is a bit kind of radical. But in Ireland, west of Ireland, everyone looks like this.
Okay, so you have a lot more hair in your beard that I have on my head. So we are on average, we have the right amount of hair on on us.
Yeah, yeah.
Nick, should I start with a tough question or with a low?
I don't mind. It's just whatever you feel like.
Okay, because I have while you were presenting yourself, why you were introducing yourself, it just came out that being 10 years in a monastery. Okay, of course you've met a lot of monks, of course, Buddhist monks. In order to be a monk, it requires for you to extract yourself from the daily life, from society, and go to another environment, right? Or a secluded one, let's say. Okay. Is this an act of courage, or it's the opposite of courage? It's
Yeah, it's a good question because
awareness.
a lot of people accuse monks and nuns of kind of avoiding life, you know,
Yes.
by doing that. But in some situations, in some monastic situations, that might be possible. But in most monastic situations, I know it's not, and it's certainly not in a Buddhist. If a Buddhist monastery is being run correctly, it's very challenging. To be a Buddhist monk or nun, you have to give up money, you have to give up your hair, you have to give up your name. For the first 5 years, you give up any decision over where you are or what you do, you know.
Okay.
And if the monastery is being run well, then they don't allow anyone to find a quiet little place in it, you know. Like, for instance, your room changes every few months. You know, when you're a junior monk, there's nothing. For certain, you can't have a phone, you know, a smartphone, or, you know, you get access to the computer, you know, once a week, you know, kind of. So it's a very challenging thing to do. So yes, to do it takes a lot of courage. How much courage depends on your situation. Some people, you know, it's the same with coming to a Buddhist monastery. I was reflecting on that because the place where I've just also taught is Georgia. And so, like Romania, they'd never had a 10-day retreat there, you know. And so, again, the first retreat I taught, I think, had 6 people on it last year, or 7. And they divided into 2 groups. They divided into a group of some people who had some insight into the possibility of meditation. Maybe they'd been to Orthodox monasteries or tried to be an Orthodox monk. They'd done a lot of meditation at home, so they were willing to commit themselves to this 10-day retreat. But the other group were all people with some deep trauma that they wanted to deal with, you know, and they were desperate. And because they were desperate, they were willing to do this, you know. So the reason, you know, and that's the same with becoming monks and nuns. Some people come into monasticism just because there's nothing else they can do, because they're dealing with something that they can see. This is the only way, this supported situation to face their stuff, to face the real difficulty in their life.
So on one hand, you can look at them and tell, I don't know, maybe they are running from the society, they are not so courageous. But on the other hand, actually, they have the courage, the monks, to go and sit only with them, without the society, which is a great proof of courage to sit with me. And no?
Yeah, I'm just going to say no one.
Okay.
I've seen no one being a monk as a way of avoiding life. It's just too difficult. You know, they get up at 4 in the morning and do meditation, 4:30 to 6:30, or these days it's 5 to 6:30. You know, and then again in the evening, they have really simple lives. No one does it to avoid it. Because it's all set up so that you really are being present with things. You know, you can't get lost. You can't avoid.
Actually,
you know, those 10 years, the privilege I had was I was in a Buddhist monastery as a lay person. I managed.
Not a monk, yes.
Yeah, I managed their building project. I offered them because the man who I'd walked around India with, when he came back, he was made the abbot of that monastery. And I knew he had a difficult situation. So I offered to go to the monastery and run the project because they were building the equivalent to their church, right?
Yes.
So I would run the project. I was the only person in the monastery who was not a monk or a nun. And that was a really privileged position. Guests could come who weren't monks or nuns and stay for a while, but there was no one permanently in the monastery who was not a monk or nun. So it was a really privileged situation where I had 1 foot in and 1 foot out, you know, and I could see the courage of the people who were young men and women who were becoming monks and nuns, the courage of what they were doing and the powerfulness of it. And then you'd also see them change over time. You know, what a powerful, you've just done a 10-day retreat and you're amazed by the effect. You know, it's far more powerful to try and be a Buddhist monk.
Exactly this thing I wanted to tell you earlier, that only after 10 days retreat, it was I felt it as an act of courage, even to put my mobile phone away for 10 days. And even more and much harder was to sit with me and my interior, let's call them demons, thoughts, and so on. And it was an act of courage, and only for 10 days. But if I was doing this for 10 years, oh my God, and working from 4 o'clock in the morning. Wow. But anyway, I can tell myself that I'm courageous enough to take care of my kids and I don't know, and take them to sports, to the school, and this is also daily acts of courage, to take the kids to some activities, you know. It's another form of courage.
It's a bit easier.
Maybe. Maybe. But Nick,
let's come back to that, because here you're getting to the nub of how courage would be seen within the spiritual, on the spiritual path.
Yes.
Courage is just having the courage to face your stuff, which doesn't seem much. I mean, a way a nun expressed it to me, which I really liked, was it's having the courage to feel.
To feel, yes.
So allow yourself to feel the things that you're avoiding. They're unpleasant things, but it's just a feeling. You're opening, and they feel unpleasant. The situation feels unpleasant. So it doesn't seem much, but it's very hard to do. So those retreats, those 10-day retreats, they're the key. You know, I teach workshops sometimes, I've taught evening classes sometimes, and I've taught weekend retreats sometimes. But I always see those as a way of people coming into this and then gaining the courage to do a 10-day retreat. Because once that period of time, 10 days, silence, no phone, you know, it's profound.
It is.
It's profound. You know, you can't avoid your stuff. And we're sitting and doing, you know, we're not doing a hell of a lot of meditation, but we must be doing 6-7 hours of meditation, 7, 8 hours of meditation a day. So you can't run away from it, you know.
I know.
And that really takes courage. But that, in doing that, that transforms you.
You know something, for me it was amazing that you talked about the nun who actually told everybody that it's important to have the courage to feel. Because before hearing this from you, I thought that the courage is very, it can be easily formulated. It comes from the ability to share what you have on your heart, in your soul. You know, the courage comes from cor, from Latin, which means heart. So core, the ability to share with everybody what do you have in your heart. But at a deeper level, in a more profound way, actually, to be able to communicate to someone what do you feel, first you need to have the courage to feel.
Yeah, yeah.
Which is harder. It is harder to have the courage to feel.
I think the idea of having the courage to share it, in doing that, you are kind of acknowledging it internally. So it's kind of the same process, but not so profound. Yeah, just there on your own, feeling your stuff, acknowledging your stuff. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard for people, but it's an interesting thing as a teacher. You know, I can only do so much as a teacher, and here I am on the west coast of Ireland, and I realised after a while that I could be providing one-day workshops which were really inspiring and uplifting for people. And we started to do that, and I started to get a lot of people coming, right? And we get other teachers coming, and that's very good. It's very supportive to people. But for me, the important stuff is the transformative. And the transformative comes through these longer retreats. And for me, anyone then who is willing to take that step, right? So is willing to do that, then I want to support them. They're the people I most want to support, you know. And I said to you afterwards, you know, if you want to contact me, fine. You know, here's an email address. If you're dealing with anything difficult, contact me, because you are someone who wants to take this seriously. And they're the people I want to give my time to. I can't do it all. So and I try and do that here. We have a, you know, once a month day of practice. We have an evening meditation group, and I meet people who want to see me, who I've taught, you know. And the idea is to be at least here in the West of Ireland, be a kind of support for people who are serious about the spiritual path.
It was such a transformative experience. I mean, but anyway, I just described it to my friends back home and to my colleagues as you know, it's like putting 3 years of therapy, of psychotherapy, in a small pill. You know, it's a condensed experience. It's more enhanced, like 3 years in 10 days. It's very powerful, very powerful.
Yeah, I've been told that before. One of my students is an Italian consultant gynecologist. You know, I really love her. She's a lovely woman. And but the Italians are very emotional, as you know. You know, so I can remember her being on the first 10-day retreat here, you know, and saying, "Oh, you know, where is the passion? I want passion." You know, she was very Italian. But at the end of it, she spoke very passionately about that. She said, in Italy, we do a lot of therapy. We're really into therapy. And, you know, I'm a doctor, and all of us doctors do lots of therapy. But it's nothing compared with what I've just gone through. You know, she really said that strongly. So you're right. What you're trying to do in therapy is, you know, the therapist is working with you to encourage you to see things.
Yes.
You know, so you're just doing it gradually. You go on a 10-day retreat, it's just there.
It's just there. Nick, I just want to ask you one more thing. It's about, you know, on one hand, as I studied courage and I got to a deeper level of understanding this, I had the feeling that it can be a skill which can be taught, learned, of course, and practiced. Sometimes I have the feeling that it's not a skill; it's a mindset. It's a mentality.
Yeah. Okay.
And just a second. And in other days, I feel that it's a virtue. It's something a more deeper level. Well, how do you see it?
All of those are right.
Okay.
So courage on a spiritual path, courage is something that grows as you practice. So, I've said, you go on a 10-day retreat and you have to face your stuff.
Yes.
It's a supported environment where I'm encouraging people to do that, but to do it gradually.
Yes.
Right. So what happens on the spiritual path, and this isn't just one 10-day retreat, this is if you really commit to yourself to it and you keep going, is that you discover that if you go about life in the right way, which is courageous, right? If you go about it in the right way, things work out, right? You can do it. You can cope with it, and so then you get more confidence in doing that. So you become more courageous.
But it's skillfulness.
Skillful? No, I prefer the word trust.
Okay.
So people that, to begin, I'm very aware that, on a 10-day retreat, that first of all, the thing you're trying to encourage them to do is let go. To let go of the thinking. When people first go on on their first few days on a 10-day retreat, they invariably find they can't stop thinking.
Yes.
Right? You've got this meditation you're supposed to be doing. You think you control your mind, but you can't do it because this thinking mind comes in the way all the time, right?
Noise, a lot of noise.
Not a noise. I mean, you get ridiculous things like little songs going through your head you haven't heard for 10 years. They come back and come back. Now, what's happening there is part of you is not wanting to let go of thinking. Because if thinking stops, where am I? Right? So, yeah. Right? So thinking stops, where am I? So actually you can't see that, but underneath there's an unwillingness to let go of this entertainment we're doing for ourselves. Right? So what you're learning on the 10-day retreats is to start letting go. To start letting go of these different things that are us. Right? So long term, the spiritual path leads to a profound letting go. In Buddhism, Buddhism is non-theistic, so it doesn't talk about God or the greater mind or anything. It just talks about what's in the way, right? So, but in Buddhist terms, eventually you can put it all down. You can let it all go, right? And what you then have is a profound experience. Because when you get out of the way, it's so much better. The basic ground of the mind, without your own tensions and the things you're holding on to, is so much better than your normal state. So it feels absolutely profound, And then people talk about enlightenment and things like that with it. But once you start putting words like that, it makes it seem special. All it is being able to let go of all this stuff. Right? So the spiritual path is one of trusting, letting go. And as you trust letting go of things a little bit, and your experience you've had of facing stuff that you were trying to avoid, as you see the benefit of that, and you've seen the benefit of it, right? Yes. So you see the benefit, you're willing to do it more, you're willing to let go more.
So your level of courage increases as the level of trust in letting go increases, right?
Yes, if you want to call it. Yes, if you want to call it that, I just see it as trust.
Okay.
Because yes, it's always trust. Because part of the path has to be one where one is in charge. So one of the points I always make for people who are coming on their first retreat is you decide how much of this you do. Yeah. You're in charge, right? So that people have a confidence they're in charge. If things start to go difficult, fine, go off for a walk. You don't have to keep facing your stuff. I want to give everyone that sense of confidence that
Yes.
they're in charge of how much they look at, how, you know, how far this goes. So it is trust rather than, you know, a kind of courage. It's a trust,
Nice.
trying to help that trust by assuring of that, you know, because you do get spiritual traditions that force people to do stuff, and then they have really nasty experiences because it's come too soon.
So
You internally, you know the point at which you're willing to see something. Someone who's got some deep trauma, that it will come up once they know they really trust this situation. They feel confident about the teachers, the situation they're in. They'll start to see some memory they haven't allowed themselves to look at since they were a child, maybe.
so courage is trust.
Yeah, I suppose so.
Okay, so the trust should be in yourself or in the universe or in the others.
I think now, okay, so no, I wouldn't say trust and courage are the same. Trust is something that builds up. Courage is the willingness to turn to face things.
Mm.
That would I see as the courage. That's the courageous movement, the willingness to face things, right? So the fact that someone comes on a 10-day retreat is courageous because they're willing to face things, right? And then challenges will come up in that retreat. And then if you go on the spiritual path, you'll be given challenges. Life will provide you with challenges. And I do see situations where people, they're not willing to face it. You know, something comes up and they don't want to face it. And they just then will kind of not go on. They're not, you know, it's, you know, as a teacher, I'm never telling anyone to do anything. I'm just providing the opportunity and supporting those who want to.
Isn't it better maybe for some people in daily life to not facing their traumas?
Well, we all need to be. We would all benefit from being free of these things. I mean, not everyone. I'm not. Let's make this clear. It's not everyone who's having to deal with deep trauma.
Of course.
You know, some people, you know, about half the people, no, a third of the people who come to 10-day retreats are dealing with trauma. The other 2/3 aren't. We're all screwed up. Humanity is screwed up, you know. We're just learning to be unscrewed up, you know.
I know.
More peaceful, more happy, and freer. But it's the same process of, you know, we're all unwilling to let go of the sense that we're doing this, you know, and we're in charge, and opening up to the unknown.
I think I love this because we are all screwed up, and the more courageous of us are just trying to live more freer, you know, with less suffering and feeling more, I don't know, free. But we're all screwed up. Nice.
One category of people I regularly get is someone who comes to a retreat and they're incredibly successful. You know, I can think of an Estonian composer. He was successful. His stuff was selling really well. He had a nice life. His wife was lovely. His kids were lovely. He came to a retreat because I'm still not really happy. Underneath, there's still a disquiet there. He's not dealing with trauma or anything. It's just the basic disconnect that we all have. You know, so
disconnect from what? From what?
That's not. I want to make the point that the blessing he had was he had it all and realized all this other stuff was not what made you truly happy.
Okay.
That's a blessing. So you do get people like that, you know, who come because they have all the things that society is telling them is what they need to be happy, and they've got them all, and they say it's not that they're unhappy, it's just that it doesn't satisfy in a deep way. And that's one of the Buddha's three, you know, one of the three characteristics he points out about the world is that within this world of things that come and go, there's nothing that will fully satisfy us. You know, and he's pointing at the fact that there is something beyond that will.
And the other two are the illusion of the self, right? And
The illusion of the self, yeah, that we put this sense of self onto things. So the things we see as me and mine is something we are doing, right? And the third one is that everything is going to change. Nothing could remain the same.
Permanent, yes. But coming back to the second one, why do we put labels with our name and trying to build up our identity, to be bigger, stronger, to be it's mine, this is mine? Don't you think it's from fear?
No.
Why is that?
Obviously, fear would make you overdo it. If you've got a lot of fear, you're going to overdo it, you know. But I think it's there are three conditionings that the Buddha calls the asavas, which are the kind of primal conditionings that are underneath everything else. And I'm a biologist. I actually have a PhD as a plant ecologist, right? So I see things in biological terms as well. And I can see that these three characteristics are just characteristics of all animal life. An amoeba, a single-celled animal, needs to know what is it and what isn't it. So it does need somehow to know what is self. And all animals need to know that. So as an animal, we have a programming that makes us do that. Right? What the Buddha points out is that the difference between us and animals is that we can wake up to this programming and see it's not true.
Okay. So it's only fear if we overdo it.
Yeah, you can do it. People do no end of stuff out of fear or out of hiding. You know, they got incredible. Some of the things, I've got a wonderful female student who tells me the stuff she used to do, and I'm amazed. Just amazed the things she did to fill up her life, so she didn't have to look at fear. I should imagine other women can understand this, but as a bloke, I couldn't understand it. That she used to go shopping. She'd go shopping, and next day take it all back. Just as a way of distracting herself. You know, I thought, Jesus, I mean, half an hour shopping and I want to get away from it. But yeah, we can do a lot of stuff out of fear, and that's particularly out of a fear of fear, you know.
The fear of fear is very, very powerful.
Yeah. So just to say something about fear, you wrote what you wanted me to kind of talk.
It doesn't matter, please.
Yeah, I know, but you did. I just want to say something about fear because it's an interesting thing. So to get this into context, I was very fortunate in that I had a happy upbringing. I was given a lot of confidence, and I was born with confidence. So I've always been, if anything, an overconfident person. So, and I was large as a boy. So even though I came from a very poor background, and I went to a very rough school that was half black, and someone was killed in the playground when I was 15. But because I was so big, as I could kind of, I was independent of that. Anyone tried to bully me, I just could, no, I'm not, I could defend myself. I was never a bully, but I was never bullied. So I ended up as an adult with a lot of confidence. So I didn't really know fear that well. And there was a point on my own spiritual path, and this is interesting because it's interesting how these things come up. By this time I'm staying in the monastery, and part of the time in the monastery was to do a 1-month retreat in the forest. I got given, they had these huts in the forest where you were supported, you were given food, and you did your own meditation retreat for a month in lovely woodlands, surrounded by woodlands. So I would do that each year. They would have 3 months retreat every winter. Right? The whole monastery is silent for, and I would get a month in a hut. So it was maybe the 4th or 5th one of those I did that I realized I didn't really know fear. Didn't know it well. It wasn't something I knew. And and this is how these things work. I've no idea, but so I had this real sense that I wanted to know fear. I wanted to, look, face up to fear. Work with fear, because it's not something I had to do much. And so I'm unusual in that, right? So the realization that I didn't really know it that well, and I came off that retreat, and there was the monastery would stay up until 4 in the morning on the full moon, right? So they do meditation through the night until 4 o'clock in the Dharma hall. So I came off my retreat. They were staying up until 4. I'm in a really lovely space, for the whole time. And there was a guy sitting next to me, a large guy sitting next to me that I'd never met. And at 4 o'clock in the morning, he was really taken with the fact, because obviously I was in a really nice space because I'd just done a 1-month personal retreat, So he's really taken with me, and wants to know who I am and stuff. And he's staying at the monastery, and he comes round to see me a lot. And then he says that he wants me to go to Slovenia, where he's from, and teach a retreat, And I said, well, no, I'm not going just because you invite me. What about the rest of the Slovenians, And and for some reason, I said to him, but I'd be interested in going walking in the mountains, because the Slovenian mountains are very beautiful. I'd never been there, but I knew that. So he said, take me walking in the mountains. It turned out to be the perfect way to see fear. This guy was crazy in how he went walking. It's just crazy. I used to be a walks leader. I've taken groups through the mountains, but I'm in charge. Here I am with a crazy guy in charge of me. It's late summer. It's far too cold up there to sleep out. We're going to have to get to the hut. He doesn't hurry. Luke can't find the hut. It's getting dark. The final time, the hut was up the mountain. We could see the light above us. It's steep. And this is before modern mobile phones. Yeah. It was one of the first mobile phones. So he just had the light of the mobile phone, not a torch, just the light of the mobile phone itself, held in his mouth. And we climbed up in the dark. So there were all manner of crazy things going on. And during the walk, I discovered that twice before he'd taken people from England walking in the mountains, and both times they'd had to call mountain rescue.
What?
But I felt, look, I can't complain. I asked to look at fear. This is perfect. And I did. He took me places where I normally would never go, and I'm just trembling with fear. And it was a really good lesson in fear. So, so I had the opportunity to study it, So what I learned in that situation was fear was always about the future. It's never about now.
Present, yeah.
So if you're walking along a track and there's a steep drop and you're going to have to go across some ice, or you're starting in the ice, it's not now, it's what it's going to be like there, the next bit, right? You're always anticipating it being worse. So the way out of it is always to come to the present and stabilize yourself in the present. And realize that I'm okay now. I'm okay here. Yeah. I've got this beating heart. I'm upset, but I'm okay. So that was a very useful lesson. So I did. I got. I think it was about 6 days of intense fear.
So 2 things out of this, at least 2 things. One is that you are not courageous. You are not a courageous person because actually you don't feel fear. You are not afraid in order to be courageous.
No, I wouldn't say that. I think I am a courageous person. I think I'm very courageous because I do things that I know are going to be very difficult.
So you feel fear sometimes?
Yes, of course I feel fear.
Okay.
Yeah, but I just didn't have that. I just needed to do that thing. I realized I saw afterwards. The problem was that every time I walk in the mountains, I've been in control. So I needed to be in a situation when I was out of control in the mountains to really feel a lot of fear. Yeah, I would say I'm courageous. I mean, my partner would say I'm over courageous. You know, I'm over. You know, you know. So, for instance, you know, as you know, the final thing I did as a walk was to go to Mount Kailash in Tibet.
Mm.
I set up this pilgrimage to Mount Kailash with 3 monks and me and 2 other lay people. And the idea was to write a book about it because I wanted to write a book about my teacher, Ajahn Sumedho, having gone to Mount Kailash. And I was interviewing all the people who went with him. So me going to Mount Kailash was just a way of seeing the same scenery.
Yes.
I thought my trip was going to be straightforward, but I knew his had been difficult. But what I hadn't taken into account was that I damaged my lungs. And I'd had an exposure to asbestos.
Mm.
And I started to see in the mountains that my lungs weren't functioning properly. So that I was getting altitude sickness and lack of breath before anyone else was getting it. And I realized, yeah, I must be working with 80% lungs, you know, because I'd been at those altitudes before, you know, but this time it was really, really difficult. But I still went on. Despite that, and knowing how dangerous what I was doing really was. And then the final thing, when we went over the pass that's around the back of Mount Kailash, which is 4,500, no, it's 19,000 feet. So that's, I can't remember what that's, 7,000 meters, something like that, you know. And so it's very high and it's very low oxygen. And by then, to do that final walk around Mount Kailash, we had a Tibetan guide with us, and he didn't want me to do it because he was scared, you know. And he only agreed if I set off early. So I set off 2 hours early before it was dark and went really slowly, and they caught me up. And then I insisted that they went on ahead of me. And what happened was that on that last climb, I was incredibly close to death. And afterwards, I was told by someone who's done that, who leads that walk a lot, that I really was. And so I could kind of do 2 steps, and then I had a stick, I had a pole, and I'd lean on the pole for quite a while, and 2 more steps. And I had this sense of easing myself up. I couldn't think, and I felt close to death. But I still did it. You know, so surely that's...
Why?
Courage.
Why? What made you do that instead of your fear and the risks? What?
Because of my trust.
In what?
Well, I've come to trust on the spiritual path. Anything that arises before you, you should face up to.
And it will eventually turn out okay.
Let's make this clear, you know, because this is quite an exceptional situation. I actually don't like being that high in the mountains. I'm a botanist. I like the mountains lower down when there's flowers. So I didn't do that pilgrimage out of choice. I've actually, you know, and when Ajahn Sumedho, my teacher, went, I trained him to go. I took him walking in the mountains, and I wasn't at all envious that I wasn't going with him. Right? I didn't actually want to do it because I knew at that height there wasn't anything living. It was just coloured rocks, you know. But what had happened was on my own personal retreat, I'd had this flash come to me that I should follow him and write a book about it. It came to me like a vision.
So it's all the motivation of your mission.
Yeah, and when I saw it, I thought, oh no, I'm not going to have to do that. I mean, I didn't actually feel, you know, I wasn't doing it out of choice. And so because of the way it came about, it was the whole exercise was one of facing up to something.
Okay.
I had no idea why, but by that time, you know, practicing by then for 40, 45 years, I just trusted the process. Whatever arises before us, we put our hands together and we bow and we do it, whatever it is, and just trust.
Because eventually everything will turn out okay because you trust in the process, right?
Well, yeah, it was a very interesting thing, the whole thing, because, you know, normally people you know, go over that pass and they have a sense of release, you know, because they've been to a high point and the blood start, you know, the oxygen starts working. But I had none of that. In the same way as if someone climbs the top of Mount Everest, they don't get it because you don't have enough oxygen to have this inspiring thing. But what did happen was I came down on my own and I eventually got to the base camp where they were staying at dark. You know, they got there at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I got there, you know, at dark, and it was long, long days. And then in the night, I kind of woke up. I woke up with everything I'd gone through, you know, the whole death experience, you know, and how there was a kind of horror of it in my body in a way, you know. And then I had trauma. And again, like seeing fear, that's been very useful because I teach people with trauma, and I'd never had trauma myself, and I'd never seen it. But I was really traumatized by the experience. And I saw internally that what trauma is an unwillingness to be present. You know, so I just didn't want to be present, didn't want to know anything. When I came back, when I came back here, my partner said, you know, it was like my eyes were dead. And I couldn't cope with people for 2 months. I'd go down in the field when they would build a wall whenever we had visitors. And then slowly I could cope with life. And then eventually I did a 1 month retreat. And that whole 1 month, I was just looking at trauma until at the end when it passed. So it was a very useful experience, you know, and through the whole thing, I just kept on just surrendering to it. This is what meant to happen. This is not why me, not, you know, any of that. Just this is what's going to be dealt with now. What's going to be dealt with now.
Okay. So if you are to rate yourself from, I know it's an absurd question, but bear with me, from 1 to 10 on a scale of, let's say, courage, how would you rate yourself?
10.
Nice. Okay.
Well, you know, in my terms, courage is the willingness to face up to things. After the amount of practice I've got total trust. Even if it means I'm going to die, I'm still trusting. It also means I don't have any fear of death. You know, because it's just the same process of just facing up to what's happening and feeling it and being with it.
I think this might be the actual key of the most of our fears, conquering the fear of death.
Yes, but you see, with the spiritual path, that starts to disappear because you start to have these profound experiences, right? And eventually, to begin with, when those profound experiences are happening, you think they're wonderful, you want more of them, you call them special names and stuff like that. Yeah. But eventually, when you're doing enough work, and if you're in the right way and your mind turns on the experience to understand it, you see that what is happening is the end of self. That each time those profound experiences happening, I've let go of the sense of me completely. So there's no me in this experience. That is death.
That is death, yes.
So that's all you're going to have to do when you die.
The lack of me. Oh, it's very...
Me's going to end.
It's very light. It's light, you know, it's light as in you get lighter.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, that was a very comforting thought. For me, it was very useful, the retreat. And also for the fact that I told you earlier that my father died right after the retreat, a couple of weeks after the retreat. And it helped me a lot to see death in another way.
Yeah. I found it very helpful to be there when my father died because, you know, as a man, it's the one you identify with is the father. You know, you might have a great sense of love with your mother, but you have a sense of identity around your father. So seeing my father die really brought it home about what I'm going to have to go through. You know, because you really identified that. And the experience was one of saying, well, yeah, I can do that. You know, I can see there's pain and whatever involved, but I can do that. You know. Gives you a sense of confidence.
And once the fear of death is getting smaller or maybe disappears, I also believe that you have more clarity, of course, more trust, more confidence, and more clarity. And actually, these are the ingredients for being courageous.
Yeah, I see.
Tell me.
I just think I don't know what it is. It's a very interesting thing, you know. Yeah, it's very interesting. I see the spiritual path, you know, but the spiritual path isn't Buddhist or Christian or anything. It's just a path, right, that human beings can take, and it can be not religious, but it's a path of waking up to oneself, waking up to one's inner world, you know, and being willing to embrace and accept what's there, right? So that is something, a turning that happens to people, that they're willing to do that and to start doing that, right? So yes, that's courageous, but the Buddha says that it depends on two things, right? And those two things are morality and generosity, right? So, you know, not clarity, but, and that's very interesting, the morality and generosity. And the first one's easy to see. So the morality is that if one is immoral, one has a lot of regret. Yeah. And regret is really painful stuff. Whenever we have regret, when we hurt someone else, it doesn't feel that bad at the time, but it stays there. Regret just stays and stays. So if you've done a lot of stuff that you regret, you have a whole load of these ghosts in your mind you don't want to look at. So it's very hard to take on the spiritual path if you've got a lot of regret about your actions, right? And especially if you're still doing it and you haven't stopped doing it. So morality is very clear, but why generosity? Yeah, and the reason is that generous people aren't thinking of themselves, you know. So I'm really aware of that when I'm teaching a hospital consultant, you know, a heart surgeon. You know, I have got a student who's a heart surgeon, you know, and he's one of those heart surgeons who's doing it for all the right reasons. He just want to be a help to people. So he's giving himself, and he's hardly ever thinking of himself. Right? So the whole spiritual process is one of letting go of the sense of self. So those people find it easy. And the other extreme would be a successful businessman, you know, who's built an empire, and, you know, and the whole thing has been about, you know, themselves and getting this done and whatever, you know, and it has resulted in a large sense of self. You know, and that's why Christ says, you know, that it's humble people who can find their way to God, not the rich.
Okay.
He's saying the same thing.
But this means that successful businessmen cannot be courageous?
They can be courageous. It's just that the internal path is hard for them. Yeah, they can do it. I've told some of them, but they find it much harder than a consultant doctor.
You know something, you told me something about generosity, which changed my approach to this subject during the retreat. I always thought that generosity means that doing some things or offering some things to other people, and I was okay with this. I think I'm a generous man, okay? But you added something very interesting. You said that generosity is doing something for someone when you don't feel like doing it, when you don't like it, when offering something to someone when you don't have it, actually. I mean, it's like a sort of sacrificing your needs when giving this. When you have, while you have plenty of money, let's say, it's easy to give a little bit of money to some, but when you have a small amount of money, it's only an example. Or when
a better example is
wow,
the one
with time. the one with time.
The better example, which everyone can understand, is my partner took on this. She won this case for lack of promotion because of her gender, and then she took on a campaign to fight for 5 other women, and I helped her with that. And it was a very difficult time for both of us, and it caused a lot of stress, and we'd argue with each other. Ultimately, it was successful. But one of the things I would regularly say to her when we were really upset was, what we are doing is generous. It's generous because it's so difficult to do.
Yes, because it's so difficult, and that's stuck with me. That it was very, very profound thought.
And I said that to her because she's a very kind person.
Yeah.
So that allowed her to see her generosity.
Nice.
To see that this difficulty I'm taking on willingly for these other people, and it helped her to come through it.
Okay. We are coming closer to the end of the podcast, and I want two things. One would be, if you have any advice for people full of fears to offer them to be more courageous, what this advice would be?
Well, with fear, it's to overcome the fear of fear and to realize, as that nun pointed out, that it's just a feeling.
Okay.
Right? So people who are dealing with a lot of anxiety, and there's a lot of, I find that maybe 1/3 to 1/2 of the people I teach these days are dealing with, at least with some level of anxiety, as part of their practice.
Okay.
I think that's just because of the modern world, which is a very difficult world. It's competitive, it's complicated. Obviously, people are going to be dealing with a lot of anxiety.
Okay.
Now, the thing about anxiety is that what people are normally doing is trying to avoid it.
Yes.
They're trying to plan things so they don't feel anxious.
Yes.
Right? So, if they're trying to plan ahead and work out ahead so they've got everything controlled, so they're not going to feel the anxiety.
Yes.
What you've got to do is wake up to the endlessness of that. Because you can't plan the world, and you're going to have this situation where you're going to start feeling anxious, and then things will change and you'll start feeling anxious again. And then you're needing to plan it all to get rid of the anxiety. It's endless. You're going to spend the rest of your life trapped in that. The way out of it is to accept the anxiety itself.
Mm.
So it's not try and avoid it. Allow it. Allow it there and feel it. So that in a situation that's bringing anxiety up, instead of trying to do something to avoid the anxiety, come to the anxiety and feel it, kind of embrace it, allow it to be there, allow and feel it in the body. For people first starting with meditation, it's very important to feel these things in the body, right? Because the body is simple stuff. So you're feeling it in the throat, in the chest, and just staying with that feeling. And if in that situation you stay with it long enough, that feeling will then subside.
Yes.
It won't go away completely, and then you can go back to the thing. Now, if you do that, every time you do it, you're starting to undo the habit of anxiety. Anxiety itself is just an energetic movement. What in Buddhism we call a sankhara, something that is born and has a life to it, right?
Yes.
So it's an energetic thing. If we don't react to it, but instead just hold it and allow it there, we're letting that energy undo. And over time, anxiety will get lessened that way.
Will decrease.
But only lessons. We come back to the basic teaching of, it's about facing things, knowing them, accepting them. So with anxiety, it's about allowing it to be there and holding it. And then eventually you're not going to be a victim of anxiety anymore. In fact, that's the lesson, is not to be a victim and allow it to be there. You can still function and the anxiety is there. Okay. Don't try and avoid it. I've got to, I don't want to be anxious because I won't be able to do this well. You're anxious. Just still do life. Just hold it, allow it.
Do you remember how did you react? And also, you were very kind to share with us in the critical situation we had during the retreat. You told us that you lived in the not knowing, and this also stuck with me. I mean, when you have a hard situation and you don't know what will be the immediate future of this situation, but actually you don't know it, the best thing you can do is to live in the moment, to live in the not knowing, because
Yeah,
you don't know.
everyone there was trying to solve what had happened
Yes,
to
it was
that girl.
amazing.
And something awful could have happened to her. As it turned out, they hadn't, you know.
Yes,
But, you know, I had the privilege to know that I didn't need to do anything, right?
yes,
So what I could do was just be with it.
yes,
And whenever you do that, it's an interesting experience because it's very powerful. Because the kind of sense of something awful could be here makes you really be present.
of
You know,
course.
I didn't have any sense of fear. I just had a sense of, well, let's see what's going to happen next and be with this. I was just sitting there looking out the window, waiting for
Of course.
over an hour for the resolution of what was going to happen.
Nick, thank you so much for all. Not, I also thank you for the 10 days, but I know it's not the moment. Now I'm just thanking you for the podcast. But at the end, if you have one question for me, or if you have something you needed to tell and I didn't ask, this is the moment.
I just hope you come to the next one.
Yeah, of course.
That's all for you. I hope you come to the next one.
Of course. I'm looking forward to get to understand what will be the next step, because after the first one, I'm sure that the next one will not be repeated, will not be the same,
No,
be different, because
you move
I am
on.
different, you know.
You do move on, and it's the you know, obviously it's the payoff for doing it as a teacher. It's just seeing the changes in people, you know, that means so much. You're actually, all of the teaching you're actually doing out of compassion. It's just, you know, and so it moves you so much to see people being helped.
And that was also an act of generosity from your side, and I know this, and I thank you for this. Thank you for talking about courage, but not only, because we didn't talk only about courage. And looking forward to seeing you again and to be this cheerful and, of course, wise. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Great. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of What is Courage podcast. If so, I invite you to click subscribe, like and share to help our channel grow and other people to be more courageous. Thank you.